Pastor Rosemary, the Astrology Angel. We utilize tropical astrology for our monthly presentations, and we also enjoy using Chinese astrology for our yearly videos and blogs. We use these systems because they are both based upon logical, verifiable, and natural seasonal occurrences and references within solar and lunar cycles. We have decided not to use sidereal, Western sidereal or Eastern sidereal, called Vedic, astrology, because they are both based upon an alignment of the sun with arbitrary, predetermined, and set stars. So it's a sun in alignment with an arbitrarily predetermined, fixed and set star, okay, located within the constellation of Aries the Ram, to find their beginning indicator point, okay, to find that beginning point. So it's based on something arbitrary, something like a choice. And we'll get to why that is later. It's not to put it down. There's a reason for it. And different types of astrology might be used for different purposes, and we'll get to that in a moment. Now, whereas tropical astrology begins at the vernal equinox, which is not arbitrary, rather is an objectively verifiable starting point. Now, Western and Eastern sidereal astrology utilizes a subjective, arbitrarily arrived at starting point, so that's the difference. Now, tropical astrology, and there's other differences too we're going to get in here in a moment we'll get into. Now, tropical astrology does not require attention to the precession of the equinoxes that people talk about. Precession of the equinoxes. Tropical astrology does not require attention to that because it is Earth-centric rather than solar-centric, okay? And being based on the equinoxes and the solstices as perceived from the viewpoint of Earth. That's why Earth-centric, okay? Earth-centric. And although Western sidereal astrology and Eastern sidereal astrology does take the precession of the equinoxes into account in their calculations, they are still based upon an arbitrary starting point and are sun-centric, not as perceived from Earth. So that's a very important difference. Now, both tropical astrology and sidereal astrology use zodiac signs that divide the ecliptic into 12 equal portions, okay? 12 equal portions. They're 30 degrees each, okay? They're signs, they're zodiac signs. And these sections of the sky are, again, they're known as zodiac signs and are not in actuality based upon the constellations themselves. In fact, the constellations are not equal in size, whereas the signs are. So again, the constellations that are up in the sky, the real constellations, are not equal in size. But the signs of the zodiac are equal in size. Rather, in both tropical astrology and in sidereal astrology, the signs are based on chosen man-made names given to each section or sign. So these names like Aries and all that, and Taurus and Gemini, and in Cancer, see, as we go through the four, okay, these signs are, they're based on man-made words, man-made associations, okay? And in tropical astrology, the name of the sections or signs were based upon where the zodiac signs were at the time the system was developed. When Aries was associated with the beginning of the year being fire of fire or cardinal fire, okay? Aries being fire of fire or cardinal fire. And which means that the initiator of the first 3 zodiac signs of the year, okay? Because you have the first 3 signs, the initiator, because you have cardinal, then you have fixed, and then you have mutable. So it has to do with the time of the year when you have, the vernal equinox, you have spring, and you have fire of fire, the initiatory point, and that's when it begins. So, and that's the beginning. You see how it works. Now, again, Aries is cardinal fire, and Taurus is fixed earth, and Gemini is mutable air. Then it begins again with Cancer, cardinal water, Leo, fixed fire, Virgo, mutable earth, on to Libra, cardinal air, Scorpio, fixed water, Sagittarius, mutable fire, and finally Capricorn, cardinal earth. Aquarius, fixed air, and Pisces, mutable water. Now these designations also had and continue to have correlations with alchemical and medicinal applications, and only means something if one is taking seasons into account. All these designations of cardinal fire and fixed air, and these kind of things, mutable water, those kind of things only matter if you're if you're taking these kinds of seasonal things into account, and then you use it for alchemy, and you use it for medicines and for healing and medical practices and diagnosis and treatment and all of that. Okay, and the preparation of tinctures and medications and when to do surgeries and all that kind. These are these are ancient techniques. Okay, all right. Now, all of the cardinal signs have one thing in common. They all indicate the beginning of a season, of which there are 4, beginning with the spring or vernal equinox. Then comes the summer solstice. After that, we have the autumn equinox, and then culminating in the winter solstice. In reality, the original creators of the tropical zodiac could have named the zodiac signs anything they wanted to. They could have used numbers, actually. Instead of saying Aries, they said call it 1 or 2 for Taurus, which is what they do with the houses. You see what I'm saying? They could have called it anything, or given it any kind of number sequence they wanted to, like a license plate, if they wanted to. They could have assigned it anything. And they also could have utilized words to indicate fire of fire, air of earth, water of air, fire of water, air of fire, water of earth, fire of air of water, water of fire, fire of earth, air of air, or water of water. And in fact, that is exactly what they did. So you see, it's very specific. And the ancients who developed tropical astrology were not surprised. They were not embarrassed. And they did not get embarrassed, and they weren't surprised or shocked. They were not shocked to learn about the precession of the equinoxes, because they already knew all about it. It simply had nothing to do with the seasonal system of Earth-centric astrology. Nothing to do with it. Okay? So understand that. And then you'll understand how these things are different, and why different things are utilized, by different people. So the tropical astrology had nothing to do with the precession of the equinoxes. They already knew everything about, because it didn't have anything to do with the seasonal Earth-centric astrology, which they were developing at that time for use as, in medicine and alchemy, which, modern medicine and chemistry and surgery are outcomes of alchemy. They're just more, they're just branches thereof, yeah? Okay. And alchemy does exist, because alchemy is when you turn one element into another, and with particle accelerators or radioactive decay, that happens. So it's not that it's not crazy, and it's not a pseudoscience. What do you think the particle accelerators are? It's alchemy. What do you think using something radioactive, which they did a long time ago, to a special stone, use in alchemy, because it can change elements. Okay, so understand that it's not a pseudoscience, and so this is what they were developing. Again, the names of the zodiac signs, which were assigned by the original makers to the artificially constructed and man-made 12 equally measured 30-degree zodiac sections of the ecliptic, were based upon the elemental attributes of the seasons as perceived from the earth, from where they were perceiving it. And they wanted to associate it with their health and their body, and their, in farming and animal husbandry and food production. That is not a pseudoscience. If people tell you that astrology and that knowing the equinoxes and the solstices are bad and evil, those are people who don't want you to be able to grow your own food. or have your own animals, have your own cow to milk. They don't want you to have the ability to feed yourself. Why? Because they want to control you. Why else would they tell you, why would they tell you it was evil otherwise? Okay? And besides, in the Old Testament, there's a lot of information. They're just called different things. There's a lot of information about these celebrations that have to do with when to slaughter animals and when to gather your food and all that. It's not evil. You might think it's evil if somebody's using a different language to say the same thing, but it's not inherently evil to grow your own food or handle your own animals. It's not. Okay, now, since we live on the earth and are all greatly affected by the seasons, using tropical astrology, which uses or utilizes seasonal temporal coordinates, seems the most logical and effective. And this brings us to the final argument of people who want to argue against either tropical astrology or astrology in general, okay, as an argument that the argument is the argument that of people who live in Australia or who live in New Zealand using tropical astrology, which should be exactly backwards if it is based on the seasons and their elemental associations, as we have just described, earlier in this presentation. That is a valid thing to talk about. Now, there are two ways you can look at it. Okay, there are two ways you can look at it, and that you can look at the question of using tropical astrology in the southern hemisphere. One way is to decide to do the hard work of adjusting the tropical astrology system for the seasonal considerations of the southern hemisphere and to name them accordingly, or to come up with zodiac animals names that are native to the southern hemisphere, much like in Chinese astrology, which is also seasonal. So what I'm saying is you have, like in China, they developed their own system that was based on their seasons in their hemisphere, using their animals, that they had around them, and the seasonal, how the animals acted during those seasons. Okay? Of course, associated with the moon too, but you understand what I'm saying. And where tropical astrology was developed, in the northern hemisphere, with the Greeks and all of that, that's, their system from where they were, their land, their animals, what they saw, what they fished and hunted and all of that, and what they what their seasons were from where they were. So you understand how you are where you are, and you base it from where you are. As we become more global, now we have to look at that. So let's take a look at that more deeply. Now this brings us to the final point of what to do. The final point I want to make about what to do about the argument of the southern hemisphere and the use of tropical astrology in the southern hemisphere. Now, since we have studied Chinese astrology, as well as tropical astrology, it becomes clear that that the most accurate astrology is that which is based upon the culture, the seasons, and the animals found in the location using any given astrology system. Wouldn't you agree? Okay. And also, in this way, it must be pointed out that the people using tropical astrology in Australia and New Zealand, who are saying that it is accurate for them, might actually be correct because of their DNA. Their DNA, their genotypes, their ancestry, which is very powerful, and which probably originated from the northern hemisphere. Okay? Unless they're from, everybody's indigenous to somewhere. They say indigenous people. So everybody's indigenous to somewhere here on the earth. Okay? Everybody, all races are indigenous somewhere, are the natives of somewhere. And say who got where first, that's a whole thing, I don't even want to get into, because that's a whole big thing we don't want to get into. But the point is, everybody's indigenous to somewhere. Everybody's indigenous. Now people migrate and migrate and migrate, and who knows who went where with whom when. But we're getting more global. So we have to start to understand where these things come from and what to do about it. So if some of the people who are from the north are in the south and are still finding that that the astrology that their ancestors, up in the north utilized, that's probably very much encoded in even the seasons in their DNA. It could work very easily because DNA is a powerful thing. And your heritage and your ancestry, your origins and your connection to that original Northern Hemisphere area, it's a very, very powerful thing. So that it's completely scientific to think that that would be true. It is not silly. It is not unscientific. It is perfectly understandable where that would be true. Okay? It's very scientific. If you know anything about biology. Okay? So, because therefore you can understand that these people who are in this situation, who are in the South, but from the North, even if it's been a few generations, still, their biological clocks and their circadian rhythms and all that, and just their seasonal clocks, remain in sync with the Northern Hemisphere even after several generations of displacement from the Northern Hemisphere, from which they are natives. In other words, the natives of the Southern Hemisphere who are not transplants or displaced from the North most likely have their own system, as do the natives of China and Hawaii, for example. So the natives of the people in the Southern Hemisphere, I'm sure, have their own system of something having to do with the stars and the seasons and the animals around them. Like here in Hawaii, a lot of us astrologers, we learn about the Hawaiian pantheon and the cultural traditions, and then we keep some of our own, and but it's a global world now. People are traveling, and we're all communicating. So it's a time when we're all enjoying each other's cultures. Like you go and you enjoy someone else's food or something. It's the same thing. It's fun, to understand the astrology systems of different cultures. It's a lot of fun. Okay. Now one must remember that all of our ancestors, again, they're native to somewhere, and they might have been displaced by something bad, or they might have traveled because of some good reason. But the point is, it's been there's been a lot of migration on the earth, and a person with the ancestry, say from England or Greece or Egypt in the Northern Hemisphere, who brought their culture into the Southern Hemisphere, is really no different whatsoever from a person who, like a Chinese person, who takes pride in and brings their culture with them to America, to Hawaii, where Chinese astrology and feng shui are enjoyed and utilized by almost everyone. Okay, that's a really good example. Also, for example, in Hawaii, it's not uncommon for members of a Christian Bible study, that I've been to be wearing yearly Chinese astrology zodiac T-shirts, using Chinese zodiac coffee cups, and practicing the ancient Chinese system of magic called feng shui in their homes. People all over the world use feng shui. It's magic. It's the same. We have the same system, the Western system. It's magic squares, and it's called sorcery. But it's okay to use Chinese feng shui, but it's evil to use, Western sorcery. It's the same exact thing. It's using the squares, the magic square. It's the same exact thing. It's the same exact thing. So understand that for example, if you're against Wiccans or something, or pagans, or witches, that is like a shaman from Ireland or from Europe. Like you say, a shaman is okay, or a medicine man or woman is okay, but a witch is not good, or a Wiccan is not good. But that's the same thing. So it's not fair to say a shaman's okay, or a kahuna's okay, or a medicine man or woman's okay, but a witch is not. They're the exact same thing. It's just somebody else's language. Witch is a language from where they're from. You're using someone else's language. And it's not evil, it's just somebody else's language. So we need more tolerance. We need to understand these things if we're going to live in this new global society that we're in, because we're connected. We're connected by the internet. We're connected. There's nothing we can do about it. We have to learn to get along. All right. So, to continue with this, therefore, much is in the same way, it is possible that because of the attunement of their DNA to their northern homeland, that many transplanted individuals living in the Southern Hemisphere are able to accurately and enjoyably use tropical astrology. You know, that's what you got to conclude. And even after several generations of having been displaced or transplanted, even after many of these displacements or transplantations, it's going to still be in them from their DNA. Now, as for those who continue to use the sun-centric systems of Western sidereal or Eastern sidereal or Vedic astrology, if these systems are based on an alignment of the sun and a synthetically chosen particular star to designate an artificial beginning of the sidereal zodiac rather than using the verifiable spring equinox, one might get the impression that those who developed these systems were not perceiving events nor seasons from the earth, sun-centric, not perceiving them from the earth. Rather, one could conclude that those who formed the star alignment-based systems were perceiving the heavens from a perspective not of this world. Okay? In fact, the creators of these types of star alignment navigation systems might have been approaching our solar system from aboard of a mana. It's just possible. It's possible. Now, for those who want another choice, there is what is now being called by some constellational astrology, based on the actual natural constellations, which vary in size. There is another kind based on 13 signs, including Ophiuchus. And these new types of astrology might just be worth a looky-loo. Okay. The information found in this document is based on the oral tradition known as Kabbalah, taught to me by Rosicrucian clergy when I was but a young girl, the facts of which I've committed to memory. Thank you for joining us, and please join us again.